I've got it. Very excited to introduce Kevin Farrell. He's our business analyst. He's been working from the conception of EBS, of us implementing EBS, and has guided the process to be able to work with a team of developers from our Department of Transportation to be able to get us up and running with the system. Very much appreciate everything that he's done. He's going to give you sort of an overview of the system and how it works and how you'll be interacting with the system as well. Thank you, Kevin.
No problem. Good morning, everybody. I have, when I'm sharing my screen, just like Diane, I can't see chats. So maybe at the end, we'll look through them, or I will look through them this afternoon and get answers to folks who have questions, but feel free to put your questions there. Someone earlier in the chat said something about old hands, and they were referring to folks who have been with GCC for a while. And those folks would know that we used a system called GEMS in the past. And on October 16th, 2023, we switched to EBS. And EBS is very similar to GEMS. It's an online portal in which you will administer your award, your grant, and you really use it to communicate to GCC. You communicate by sending reimbursement requests, by sending change requests. All these are things we're going to look at during the demo, but want to let you know that we're almost a year into using the EBS system, and I'll talk at the very end about things that are coming, kind of a preview of what's next in EBS. So here's kind of the agenda I wanted to cover. So we'll talk about requesting access, who should request access and how to do it. And then I'll give a demo of kind of 4 areas within EBS, how to access your grant award application, how to look at your application. Next is how to change things on that application. You'll submit a change request, and then that's reviewed and approved by a GCC grant administrator. Next is how to submit reports or other documentation to GCC. That's what Jason referred to a little bit ago about progress reports or performance reports. And then last, we'll look at how to submit reimbursement requests. After that, I'll talk about EBS resources. And then, like I said, look at a preview of what's coming up next in EBS. Requesting access to EBS. So each user must submit an application for access. You can have multiple users within your organization. And let me talk about who should have access. Anyone who needs to log in and review or submit information should log in. The old GEM system, we actually had roles where on your side, on the subrecipient side, the system would route workflows to your financial officer for approval or to your authorizing official for approval. And EBS doesn't have that yet. So anyone who needs to log in and look at something will need to get their own user set up. And then anyone who will be submitting these forms needs to have a user set up. So the first step, actually the first step is the 4th thing there, is you must have an NCID first. So make sure you have an NCID. I'll talk about it in a second, but there's an application you fill out to get access. The link is right here on the screen. And then also this QR code, you can scan that when we put the PowerPoint up, and that will take you to this application. You'll need to select DPS Governor's Crime Commission as the agency. You'll see that there are several other state agencies that use this EBS application. Governor's Highway Safety is one. Council for Women and Youth Involvement is another. So there are several organizations, and we're kind of coalescing around one system that folks are using for grants at the state. And the system is actually managed by DOT, Department of Transportation. So if you email the help desk, which I'll talk about in a minute, you might get an email back that says DOT. EBS is managed by DOT, but there are multiple agencies across the state who use EBS, GCC being one. So I talked about having an NCID first, and NCID, there are actually 2 different types of NCIDs now. There's regular NCID for state and local government employees, and then there is myncid.nc.gov for other organizations like nonprofits, anything that's not a government employee. So depending on which group you fall into is what you'll need to go to first. If you're a government employee, you'll go to, and that is local governments as well, state and local governments. You would click here, make sure you have an NCID. If you're a nonprofit, you would go to the My NCID and make sure you have one of those. And that's just a kind of a verification of you are who you say you are. And then pretty much anytime you interact with North Carolina state government, you'll use that as your login. You'll end up putting your name and email address on the request form that I talked about earlier, and that name and email address must exactly match what you put in as your NCID or My NCID account. If you have two different emails, if one is your work email and then in the application you put your Gmail, it's not going to work. They're going to reject it and say that emails have to match exactly. If you put your middle name on your NCID or your maiden name, make sure you put that on the request form. They must match exactly to make sure we're working with the person we think we're working with. And then the process, once you submit that application, is that GCC will review and approve it first, and then we send that approval to EBS Security, the folks over in DOT, and they will create the access, create the login, and allow 48 to 72 hours before you should see an email with, welcome to EBS, here's your login, here's how you get started. If you have access, let's say you've been using, because several of you have already used EBS in the past. If you've used EBS for Council for Women, and now you need GCC, you still have to go fill out that application again, and this time select DPS, Governor's Crime Commission, as the agency. It does ask you, it says, if you already log into NCI, or if you already log into EBS, what is your login? And you put it there. So even those of you who have access under other agencies, you'll still have to fill out that application. And again, I said earlier, anyone in your agency who needs access will have to fill out that. Also, one thing to realize, all users at your organization will see everything for your organization. So if employee 1 starts a reimbursement request and then employee 2 logs in, they can see and edit that reimbursement request. So you may not want to have a lot of people with access, because you don't want people stepping on each other in applications and reimbursements. But just know that anything that's entered in the system, anyone who has access to EBS for your organization will see it. Once you get that email from DOT, you'll log into the address there, www.ebs.nc.gov. You'll put in the username and password. The username and password will be exactly what you use for NCID or My NCID. And then press log on, and it'll take you to the system, which we'll look at in a minute. And there's a QR code that will take you directly to that link. If you go to this page and you put in your username and your password, and you press log on, and you get an error message that says, we can't authenticate, or some other message, the first thing you should do is go to either My NCID or NCID and try logging in there. It could be that your account's locked for some reason. If you put in your password too many times, it'll lock for 30 minutes. Or if you haven't logged in for a certain amount of time, maybe you need to change your password. So that's your first thing if you can't log in. So I wanted to mention that, and then later in the presentation, I'll talk about how to contact us if you have other issues. So now I'm going to pull up the demo system, and I'll talk about how to navigate the system. Again, we'll look at your award, your application, how to submit changes to it, how to submit reports and other documentation to GCC, and then how to submit reimbursement requests. But before I go in there, I do want to let you know this is a test environment. It may not look 100% like what you log in to do in the production, but it's pretty close. Also, you may see data in here that doesn't make sense, or I think the application I'm going to look at doesn't have any data in it, so it'll just be blank. So don't get hung up on that. We're more looking at how to navigate, what buttons to push, and how to do things. So that's what I'll talk about. So let me switch over to that system. And I'm logging in to the test system as a subrecipient. Once you log on, the first thing you are presented with is this screen, and we call this the portal screen. And you have these boxes, and we call those tiles. And each tile will take you to a different function or a different area of EBS. Across the top, I'll just, there's some buttons. There's a help section here. If you click on the little person here, this is where you log out. There are some settings that you may look at, but basically everything you need is on this page. If you have multiple grantee or grantors, so if you have Council for Women, you'll have 2 rows of these tiles. These will say GCC. The second row would say Council for Women. So the 4 tiles that are available is applications, change requests, performance reporting, and reimbursement requests. You can move these around in any order you want, and it will remember that, hey, I want to put reimbursements first because that's the thing I'm going to be doing the most. I'm going to put it back in the order that I plan to present in. And the first thing we'll look at is applications/agreements. So once you click that, it's going to take you to a page that shows all your applications or open agreements. And it's just in a table. Here's the ID of each. Each will have a description, a name. It's going to list your organization there as subrecipient. And there's going to be a status. So the statuses tell you kind of what's going on with the application. Ready for reimbursement means it's open. It's ready to submit reimbursements. Sometimes we'll use the term open, but that's, ready for reimbursement is open. This next one says submitted, GCC preliminary review. So that's an application that has been submitted and we're reviewing it. There are other statuses you may see, and they pretty much make sense. Here's one that's created. So this is an application that has just been created and not submitted yet. So we'll look at that one. It tells you who in your organization created it. Again, it has the number and the name. And then this top section is kind of current or active applications. Below there, you'll see historical applications. And you'll see a status of completed or canceled. Again, this is test data, so there's a lot of stuff in here. Yours probably won't have this many, but you will have a section of current or active at the top, and then historical or old at the bottom. So just also, when the time comes to create new applications, this is the screen you'll come to and hit create new application, but we'll talk about that more in the grant writing workshop that's on October 30th. But now just to manage or to administer your grant, let's say this first one is the grant you're administering. You would just come in here and simply click on it, and it takes you to the application. The GEM system that we've used in the past, on the left-hand side, there was a kind of a navigation that would take you to the different sections of the grant. The navigation in EBS is across the top. So abstract narrative is kind of the, some of the questions in the application. What's the problem? What's the project concerning? And you can just click on these different sections and they'll take you, it'll jump to that section. I'll mention officials, as this is one that probably needs to be changed from time to time. Project director, financial officer, and authorizing official will be listed here. Again, we'll talk about how to change this a little bit later, but this is just how you would look at it. You could just look at your budget and say, okay, how was the budget set up? There's a summary which shows you each expense group, year 1, year 2, year 3 total. And expense groups are kind of big buckets of expenses. So supplies is one of the groups, equipment, personnel. And if you scroll down a little more in the budget table, that's where you see the actual lines. So you'll see that supplies expense group has a line called computers for $123. The travel section has a line called in-state for $40,000. And you can click on these, and it'll take you to more information. You know, there's a description that's required and then a detailed description. Again, this is test data for computers. A good description might be Dell laptops, and then detailed description might say something like purchasing 42 laptops at $1,200 each for a total of whatever 42 times 1,200 is. That's where you put in that information during the application period. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to change those. But now we're just looking at it. We're just looking at our budget, looking at what's there. We can look at the salary. Let's look at this line. This one also includes what's the employee's name and what's the percent spent on project. And we'll talk about how to change those when we get to change requests. But you can navigate through the agreement or through the grant by these buttons at the top. And again, these are all questions that were completed during the application. There were certifications that were filled out, and there are also attachments. You'll want to go here from time to time because you may receive an email that says, we've added something to your agreement, we've added an attachment, go review it. And this is where it would show up under the attachments. So the attachments are originally what you put there during the application, but then GCC can also add attachments there and ask you to go look at them. You can print the application using this print button. It's going to print just like this. Kind of exactly what you see on the screen will print out. Again, this one's empty, but it just shows you that you can print. There's a print button on pretty much all pages within EBS. So you can always hit that print button. And the print button also gives you kind of the ID number of what you're looking at. So this is agreement 72366. You go back to the top and just double check that. Actually, it doesn't show at the top. That's the only place it shows. So that's your agreement number. Agreements always start with this 20,000. We'll probably shorten your grant administrator may shorten it and say agreement 72366 because all of them start with this first 20,000 number. So again, this is where you would go in just to look, not to make changes, but just to look at your grant or your award and see what's there. The next tile we'll talk about is change requests. And this is where you would go when you need to make a change to something that's on your award. So I'll click to it, and again, it'll take us to this kind of table that shows current at the top and historical at the bottom. You'll see this time and time again in EBS. So any ongoing change requests and then any historical change requests. Again, you can see the status, submitted, under review, canceled, approved. You'll be able to tell what's going on. But the first thing you would do is hit create change request. And it's going to say, okay, which agreement are you trying to change? Here's a list of agreements. I'm just going to do this first one. And this is the change request form. The first and possibly most important thing on this form is justification. So you would say, I am updating officials and adding, and I say changing the cost of computers. So that gives your grant administrator an idea of what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. You may even include why you're doing it if that's important. But make sure you fill this out to let your grant administrator know what's going on. And then again, we have a series of kind of navigation points at the top. And these are the things that you can change or you can request to be changed. And the first is an extension request. So let's say we want to add 30 days. You would say, okay, I'm requesting to add from December 31st to January 31st. So that would be adding 30 days. Excuse me. Again, you would put in the specification, I am requesting an extension due to whatever the reason is. The next thing you can change is called scope changes. So in the application, we looked at the abstract and kind of the timeline. You can change those if your project changes significantly enough that you need to redo this, most likely you're going to be discussing with your grant administrator, and they'll tell you you need to put in a change request to update your grant abstract or your grant timeline. But this is where you would do it. So it's going to show you what the original information is, and then you can type in what the new information is. That the things you can change are the abstract, the timeline, goals, and objectives. The next thing you can, I'm going to skip budget and go to that one towards the end. Next thing you can do is officials. So if this were filled out, your current officials' names would be here, and you would simply just type over them. So if Josh Jenkins was there and your new project director is John Smith, you would just go in and type in John Smith, put in his new phone and new email, and then submit it. And again, this is sent to your grant administrator and they approve it. There's an attachment section where you can just add attachments if you need to provide some proof or provide some backup. You give it a type. You might say, hey, this is a quote. I'm changing the price on something and I'm attaching a quote. And then you would just hit the plus button to attach it. Find the file on your computer, and then it would upload. So probably one of the main things you will use this change request for is to update your budget. So let's look at that section. So again, I'll click on budget, and it gives you kind of match requirements at the top. It gives you this budget summary section that we looked at over on the agreement page, where it shows you the big buckets of expenses, and then it gives you the budget table, which are your budget lines. And this is where you can make a change. So I said in the justification above that we're changing the price on computers. So let's say instead of $123, the price of computers went up by $100. So you'll put plus 100, and that took it to $223. But I probably need to take 100 away from something to make it balance. Right now, this is an important line down here that says your total requested change is 110 bucks. The $10 is because there's an indirect here. So we changed it by 100. We added 100. It also added 10 to indirect. That's why you'll see 110 there. So I need to take away 100 from this. So you put in negative 100, and then it balances. It says, okay, you haven't made any, you haven't taken away any money or added any money. So that's what you're looking for when you submit most adjustments. You're looking for it to stay at a net zero. Your grant administrator may tell you at times that you need to, for some reason, add money or take money away, and they can walk you through that. One of the change requests I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically is salary. So if you click on what I've seen many people do is saying, okay, I need to update this person. This employee has changed, so I need to change it from employee named 1 to employee named Kevin. Well, it's not letting you do that, and there's a reason. We don't want to lose that information. We don't want to lose it. So the way you do this, the way you change a person's name, is actually to create a new line. Personnel, salary specified position. There's really no change amount. And then the new employee's name is new employee. And time spent is 100%. It's going to add the line here to the bottom. And what you're going to do is move that money from this line. So there's $9,000 in it. We'll put negative 9,000 there. And positive 9,000 here. And that preserves the original line. So we still have it. We still have that person's name and percent effort, but you just created a new line and moved that $9,000 from the old line to the new line. Also, when you're entering these, make sure you put in good, good descriptions. In the detailed section, you may say, hey, this is a prorated cost, or here's the calculation for this. We're purchasing 200 of these at a cost of 100. Put as much information in there as you can. That's why we have two descriptions, kind of a short description, just give it a name, and then detailed description is where you would put the more details. So my point here was, if you're trying to change employee name, you've got to create a new line and then move the money from the old line to the new line. So I think that's all the sections of the change requests. Again, you can hit this button to print it. Each of them has a unique number. This is change request 49108. At the bottom, you can save it or submit it. So let's just save this one. And it says the new budget cannot be less than the already reimbursed amount. That is probably just a error that's in test. So let me just change that back. And what I want to show you is that it's saved. And then I can go back to my list and it should be the top one. So there it is. There's the one I just created. It says in process by recipient, meaning that you just created it. You can cancel it. If so, it goes away forever. It moves down here to the historical one, or you can go back into it, make more changes, and then submit it. Remember that anyone in your organization who has access can also go in there, open it, make changes, and submit it or cancel it. That's why you probably don't want to have everyone having access to this. Definitely the project director and anyone who needs to log in and review stuff. So that's change request, where you would go make changes to your agreement. The next one we'll talk about, I'm going to save reimbursements for last. That's probably the one you're most interested in, and I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll do that one last. But progress performance reporting is what Jason referred to earlier as progress reporting or performance reporting. There's a set schedule where you have to send things in. Some of them are called PMT reports. There's a list of reports you have to submit, and this is where you would submit them to GCC. It's how you communicate with us. You communicate these reports. So let's click on that tile. Again, it takes you to a section with active stuff at the top and historical at the bottom. You can see this agreement has or this subrecipient has several submitted to be reviewed. Here it tells you what it is: an extension budget template, a notice of grant implementation, a SAS progress report. But when you're ready to submit one of these, you would hit submit new report. And just like all the other ones, the first thing it says is, hey, which agreement are you trying to submit for? So we're doing this one. And it fills in some information at the top, and the agreement ID and the name, your subrecipiency, your organization name will fall in, who created it, what date it was created. And then you select kind of what you're trying to submit. So there's a drop down here with a list of different reports. This may be your EEOP certification that we just talked about. You would say you give all your reports a date. So let's say this certification covers a quarter. That might not make sense for this one, but let's just say it covers July 1 through September 30th. So you give it a date, you give it a name or a type, and then there's a place to put comments. You would say, I'm submitting whatever it is you're submitting and why. And then you would add it as an attachment. So again, you press the plus button, find your document, and attach it. And the file name shows up, shows who created it, who attached it. And again, you can either save it or submit it. or go back to your list. Again, you can print it up here. This one again has a unique number. Your grant administrator will know more about this list of reports. I do think there's going to be a change of some of these names, like the VAWA reporting is going to change to new names. But again, your grant administrator would know which reports are valid for your project. And again, there's a set schedule. Some of these you will be submitting monthly or quarterly, or some of these progress reports are just once a year. So you would go in once a year and do your GCC progress report. These reports are found on the website. You would download it. It's probably a fillable PDF. You would fill it in and then come here and attach it. Again, once you submit it, you'd be able to go back and see, okay, it's submitted for approval. Once it's approved, you would get an email from the system saying, hey, this has been approved, or this has been denied, or this has been returned to you to make some changes. And then if it's approved, it would come down. You'd get an email, but then it would fall down here to the historical list. So the fourth and probably most important tile is reimbursement requests. So when it's time to submit your monthly reimbursement, you would click here. Again, you're presented with a table of current reimbursements at the top and historical reimbursements at the bottom. There will be a status, which will say things like payment pending if it's approved, or you may see one that says under review, submitted under review. So this kind of tells you what's going on with it. Once it is either paid or once it's paid, it will go to the bottom section, like this one right here that says invoice paid. If it's canceled, again, it comes down here. So to submit a reimbursement, you would first hit the create reimbursement button. Next thing is you're asked which agreement are you trying to request for. We'll just do this first one again. Claim cannot be until, okay. So it's actually a good error. So it's telling me, hey, you can't do one because there's already another one in progress. So let me do a different agreement. So again, this is a form that you fill in. Some information is pre-populated for you, like the agreement ID, your organization name, the day it was created, who created it, what the program is, active budget year for agreements or grants that have multiple years. You'll see either 1 or 2. Earlier, someone mentioned the final reimbursement. If this is the final reimbursement, you would switch that to yes. For each reimbursement, you're going to enter a period of time that it covers. I mean, it's usually monthly. So let's say this one is August 1st through August 31st. So 1 month period. Your indirect cost rate would be there if you have one. Match would be up here. So if you're reporting match this period, you would say, okay, I'm reporting, I've got to give $1,800. I'm reporting $833 for this period in cash match. Again, that automatically lowers it and says your remaining match would be $1,000. There's currently no match approved, but this is the area where you do match. The next thing is to look at the budget lines themselves. So this is a different one than we looked at earlier, but it still has similar budget lines. There's a computer line, an in-state travel, and an indirect cost line. So let's say we're submitting our reimbursement for these computers, and out of the $10,000 we've budgeted, we are requesting $8,000. And reimbursement, it goes ahead and says, okay, you've requested $8,000, your balance will be $2,000. This one, we're also requesting $100 of in-state travel. And it automatically calculates your indirect. So this supply line, this I right here tells me that, okay, it's indirect eligible. So it went ahead and added the percentage of indirect cost based on that $8,000. which I assume 15% of 8,000 is $9,300. Again, I'm in a test environment, so it may not work exactly, but that's what it's supposed to do. It says this is indirect eligible, so it multiplies the amount you're requesting in direct cost by your indirect rate and fills in what your indirect would be. Excuse me. So this is kind of the budget area, the reimbursement budget area. You may need to put in some comments to let your grant administrator know something. It's always good to tell them what's going on, what you're submitting, why you're submitting it, and if there's anything odd about it. And then you have to add supporting documents, and your grant administrator can tell you more about this. You would select your document type. I'm attaching an invoice, and then again, just press the plus button, find your invoice, hit open, and that will attach that invoice as attachments. There are kind of some certifications here that you need to read through, and it says by submitting this, our agency is attesting to the following. You know, everything that we're doing is in compliance with the laws and regulations. So you will need to read through those. You can ask your grant administrator if you have questions on what that text means. Again, I'm in a test environment, so this may look a little bit different when you log into the lab environment. But you'll add your attachments here. You may have several. I think you put them together in a package with a cover sheet. So this is where you would attach those packages. And then again, you can save it, hit back, or submit it. Again, you can only have one of these submitted or active at one time. So let's go ahead and submit this one. It's going to ask you, are you sure? Once you submit it, you cannot edit it. And once you submit it, it will take you back to the list page, which is the table of current and historical requests. So this is the one I just did, and it says it's submitted. So I have reviewed each of the 4 tiles here. Applications, agreements is where you would look at your grant, look at your award. Change requests is where you would make changes to that. It could be changes to the budget. It could be changes to your grant officials. It could be requesting an extension. The next is progress performance reporting. This is where you submit reports to GCC and they're reviewed. And then lastly, reimbursement requests is where you put your monthly call statements and reimbursement requests in for review by the GCC administrator. You would go here when you're ready to log out and you sign out, and it would take you back to the login screen. So let me go back to my PowerPoint because I think I had a couple of things here. Yeah, talking about change requests. So I put in some tips. So change requests, always enter a justification explaining what it is you're requesting to change and why that change is necessary. I also put in a note about budget adjustments when you're trying to update an employee name and percent effort. You're unable to do that. You have to create a new budget line for that new employee and then move the total amount of remaining funds from that old line from employee 1 to employee 2 to the new employee. And the next tip there is to use descriptions in the budget section to let GCC know the details. You know, what's the quantity? Those of you who used GEMS in the past may remember that we put in a quantity and a unit cost. So this is where the description section is where you can put in that quantity and the unit cost. You know, we're purchasing 200 laptops at a cost of $1,200 each. Always include if something is prorated. You may include you kind of show your math there of how we prorated something. You know, this was 8 months of a $10,000 charge, so it's $8,800 or so. So you show how you prorated it. Reimbursement requests. tips. So these are a couple of things you need to be aware of. So in order to show up in the North Carolina financial system, you have to complete a 990 form, or what they call a substitute 990 form. And that links kind of your company name to an address. So if you're changing, most of you are already going to have this set up. If you are a first-time recipient, you may be asked to complete this. But most of you, your organizations are already in the state financial system. But if you need to change the address of where your check is mailed, you'll need to fill out another one of these. If the check has been mailed to Town Hall for years, but now the police department's moved somewhere else and we need the check moved, or the check to be mailed to the new police headquarters at a different address, you would likely need to fill out a sub W-9 form and submit it to set up that new site, is what it's called in our system. So your grant administrator can help you with that, but just know you have to be in the North Carolina accounting system or financial system. It's called NCFS in order to get paid, and sub 990 form is what gets you in that system. And then there's also an electronic payment form. So if you don't want paper checks mailed, if you'd rather have direct deposits submitted, there is an electronic payment form, and your grant, I think it is on the website, but your grant administrator can definitely help you with that too. So that has to be completed, and it takes a period of time to get that one approved, but you need to have that completed to get electronic payments. And for both of these, discuss with your grant administrator on how to complete those and who to send them into. So next, let me talk a little bit about EBS resources. Kind of the first line of support. Your first friend is always going to be your grants administrator. So I would say, contact them if you have questions, especially about programmatic, but they know the system well too. We have online documentation. There's a user's guide that has been updated recently with screenshots and information on how to log in and how to submit some of these requests. And then lastly, there's the EBS help desk. Again, you'll notice it says ncdot.gov because this is a Department of Transportation system. You can email them with questions like, I've tried logging in, I've checked my NCID, and I'm still unable to log in. You can also email them with questions about your budget. If it's not doing something you think it should do, or you put in a number and you get a unexpected error message, you could submit that to the help desk. I would encourage you, and I'll add it to this slide before we put it on the website, to always copy your grants administrator if you email the help desk. That way they can be aware that you have an issue going on, and also they can help to follow up on the issues you're having. So I'll add that always to copy your grants administrator. The user's guide is on our website. I didn't include a QR code to scan here, but I'll do that also before we post this to the website. And the last section I want to talk about was kind of a preview of what's coming up next. So the EBS system is always being enhanced and developed. Since there are RFAs coming out and a new round of applications, we're doing some updates to the application. You may see some questions in different orders or different questions, but those will all be talked about in the grant writing application workshop on October 30th. We're going to add something called subrecipient profile. If you used the GEM system prior to EBS, we had a feature called organizational documents. And that's going to come back in something called subrecipient profile. So those tiles or boxes I was showing on the portal page, there will be one called subrecipient profile. You can go in there. That's where your organization information, names, phone numbers, that's where your officials will be stored. So in order to change officials, you'll put in a request through the profile to update your officials. And then that's also where your organization documents will be. It's very similar to the old system, or if you didn't use it, let me explain what it did. It would give you a list of, these are the 13 documents you have to provide and keep updated. It would allow you to, let's say one of them is a just your finance policy, your financial policy or guidebook. You would attach it and submit it, and someone at GCC would review it, and they would either approve it or deny it or send it back to you and say, hey, we need this changed. And then they would give it an expiration date. It might expire in 2 years, it might expire in 1 year, but you would have a date there of when that document expires. And you'll get an email saying, hey, this document is expiring in 30 days. You need to go in and submit it or resubmit it for approval again. So that's kind of on the horizon. We'll do some training around it when it's available, but wanted to let you know, especially those of you who used organization documents before, that it's coming back. And then the ability to print an application, I think I showed it in the test environment, but I'm not sure it's in production yet. So that will be in production, the ability to print any page within EBS. So that's kind of a what's coming up next. Also, I would say if you have, if there are things that you would like to see enhanced, discuss that with your grant administrator. They can get it to me, and then I can talk to the DOT development group about whether or not that's possible. And I think that's the end of my presentation. I do have a couple minutes left for questions, or I think I'm the last thing before lunch. So Jason, how do you want to handle it?
One or two questions that were in the chat. Give me
Okay.
just a second and I'll pull those up.
Okay.
So I think they were related to budgetary type questions, and Amy Monroe indicated, do we split out the salary if the personnel changes mid-budget year when moving it from line item to new employee line item?
So I think you would move any remaining funds. So if there were $20,000 in there and 10,000 had already been reimbursed, you would move the remaining 10 from the old line to the new line.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay.
If the new employee is coming in after the old employee has already been paid from that line, would you move the full amount or just that partial?
Just the partial, just the amount that's unpaid. You're creating a new line for the new employee. So you would put the remaining funds from that original line in the new line.
Gotcha. And we had one idea for an update. Will you ever update the change request to include the item description? It makes doing an adjustment difficult when you have multiple salary lines and you can't see which line is for who.
That's a good request. Okay, so I'll look into that. So it's the longer description, or it may be both descriptions that would need to be changed. I'll look into that. That's a good request.
Let's see if we got anything else. I'm scrolling down. I don't see anything that wasn't answered so far, but what we will do is we're going to keep a record of the chat, and after we complete each of the different presentations, we'll be going back and looking to see if there was any questions that we did not answer, and we'll be creating a question and answer sheet and then posting that for each one of the different sessions, along with the PowerPoints and a recording of the session as well. So just because we may not have answered your questions within the chat doesn't mean that they won't be provided an answer in the end. We're also going to send an email to everybody, letting everybody know when we do have the FAQs posted or the question and answers posted, so that everybody doesn't have to keep checking the website. You'll get an email from us letting you know that you can go and take a look at all that. Kevin, if you don't have anything else, then we'll release everybody just a few minutes early to head to lunch. We hope to see everybody back after lunch. We'll start promptly at 12:15.